Anxious or avoidant attachment, which one tends to do the most damage to relationships? Let's start with the very, very obvious. If you've ever dated someone who's on the opposite end of the attachment spectrum from you, you already know how messy things can get. The anxious person wants closeness. The avoidant person wants the opposite, lots and lots of space. And in between these two attachment styles, the relationship ends up stuck in this never-ending hot and cold loop that feels impossible to break. So which of the attachment styles actually ends up doing more damage in relationships, anxious or avoidant? Today we're going to break that down, and I'm going to give you an answer by the end, but it may not be the one you think. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. Around here, we talk a lot about how old childhood patterns, how anxiety, how emotional dysregulation, how these things affect the way we attach to other people, what our identity looks like as adults, how we operate our lives. And we talk about this because we want to do better. We want to put our lives under our own control.
Wait, did you subscribe yet? I have a lot more to share and I'd love to have you here for it. It really helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much.
Let's start with the anxious partner first. If you're anxiously attached or you lean towards the anxious side of things, let's say that this is the anxious side here, your nervous system is already wired to seek closeness like it's a life and death situation. So when your partner does pull away even just a little bit, you automatically interpret this as a problem. Not necessarily because something dramatic is happening on their end, but because you're already on high alert at all times, and you're sort of scanning your environment and your partner and the relationship for signs of distance or disconnection. You're wired to look for, well, the worst case scenario, because the fear that's always humming underneath of everything in you is, I'm going to be abandoned. So the moment there is space, your coping strategies kick in right away. And for you, those strategies often look like reaching out to your partner constantly, whether that's texting them or calling them or just sort of following them around the house if you're living together. Always looking for a little bit of contact, asking a lot of questions like, are we okay? Are you okay? Obsessively scanning your partner's mood or their emotional tone, the way they say things. It's not about what they say necessarily, but about how they say it. Replaying conversations you've had with your partner in your head over and over, ruminating, overthinking the way your partner says anything and everything, the way they say hi in that last text, or the way they say see you later or see you after work when they left the house this morning. You analyze their actions for the same thing, for signs that maybe they're about to abandon you somehow or pull away from you, which always leads to abandonment.
No pressure. I didn't hear back from you for like 4 hours, and I know you're working, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't say, or if I did, that's totally fine, but just let me know either way. Or don't, okay?
So your partner not calling you back when they said they would, or taking a detour to the mall on the way home from work, these things can take on much bigger meaning than they really have, because you start assigning a little bit of meaning, hidden meaning, to things that might not mean anything at all, because your system is hyper attuned to shifts in the other person's emotional tone. And any shift, no matter how small it is, it feels like it could mean rejection or worse, abandonment. By the way, if this dynamic already sounds familiar to you and you're trying to figure out where you fall on the attachment spectrum, I've created a free quiz down below that can help you get a little bit more clarity on things. It's called the Attachment Style Quiz, and it's a good starting point to find out your attachment patterns. You'll find the link below completely free. Or if you're feeling overwhelmed and you find yourself needing something that can help you calm your nervous system in anxious moments or when you start to feel dysregulated, there's another free download below called the Calm Down Toolkit. And that one walks you through simple regulation strategies that actually work in the moment, that I've used a lot myself and I still use to this day when I'm feeling super stressed and I need a little bit of help regulating my nervous system. Now, here's the thing. Anxious people are not out there ruining relationships because they're too needy. That's not the issue that's plaguing them. The real issue is that the more anxious they feel, the more they need the relationship itself or their partner to help them regulate. Because the anxiously attached person has trouble feeling calm and peaceful and grounded all by themselves, they never really learn how to do that. And more importantly, they don't really believe that they can do any of those things on their own. That's why they're always checking to see if their partner is okay. Because if their partner is okay, then maybe they're okay too. Are you okay? Okay, then we're okay. With their partner's help, they can regulate their own nervous system, but without the external support, they often don't feel okay on their own. And they generally don't believe that they can self-regulate on their own, even if these beliefs are unconscious. And this is exactly why it's so hard for anxious partners when their partner is stressed out, or when they're emotionally tapped out, or working long hours, or their partner is just not coping well with life themselves. Because the moment that their partner becomes dysregulated, the anxious partner automatically feels dysregulated too, because they haven't built the internal foundation to stay calm and steady when the other person is not. So in this way, the anxious partner relies to a large extent on the other person to help manage their inner world, in a way to be a sort of extension of their own nervous system. And sometimes they need their partner to do most of the regulating. And as you can imagine, that can put a lot of pressure on a connection. Why are you being distant?
What? What are you talking about? I'm making dinner.
Well, you're not saying anything. Are you mad at me?
No, I'm fine.
You said that weird. What's going on?
I'm literally just chopping zucchini.
Well, it feels cold. This kind of behavior stems from a single belief. Even if you don't say it out loud, it goes back to this. I can't calm down unless you fix this for me, unless you help me to regulate myself. And spoiler alert, that's a really heavy thing to place on someone who leans toward the avoidance side. Now, let's look at the avoidance side. Avoidant partners often come across as calm and self-contained, distant even, or uninterested in deep emotional connection. But that's not exactly the full story, because underneath that, there's also a deep root system of complexity. Avoidant attachment is actually a response to the same underlying fear, that connection is not safe. Only instead of clinging tighter to their partner, like someone with anxious attachment might do, avoidants protect themselves by doing the opposite. They pull back. They lean towards fearing rejection more than abandonment. So when things get close, when there's too much emotional intimacy, or when the relationship starts to feel too emotionally charged, or they start to feel too vulnerable, their nervous system goes into shutdown mode and they disconnect. Can we talk about this later? I need some space to think. It's not you, I'm just overwhelmed. I'll be fine tomorrow. Or maybe Thursday. Or maybe next month. I don't know. I'll call you. Avoidant partners also tend to bottle up their emotions, so they're much less in touch with how they're feeling. They downplay conflict for this reason. They avoid the kinds of heavy or vulnerable conversations that make an anxious partner feel close and safe to their partner. Because the avoidant deep down is terrified of being consumed by the relationship, by the needs of the other person, by the emotional intensity of the connection, and by their own fear that if they try to meet the partner's needs, they'll fail and they'll be rejected by the other person in the end anyway. So when pressed, they prefer not to try at all. That's why they seem like they're always running away. They push people away, they keep you at arm's length, or they ghost emotionally or literally. You can connect with an avoidant and everything feels fine in the beginning. They'll be present and engaged, and they might be deeply in love, and then you enter a real relationship. And a few months go by, maybe a year goes by, maybe a few years go by. You're living together and you've gotten married maybe you've had kids. For some of us, all these things can happen very quickly. And then one day, they disappear into the background. They sort of vanish. Not physically, they're still there in the house with you. They're doing life with you. They're parenting alongside with you. They're still going out with you, hanging out with friends, making plans. But emotionally, they've sort of disappeared into the background. And often when this happens, it's because something or a series of somethings has triggered their fear of intimacy. Maybe too many conversations, maybe too much conflict, or too many needs from the other person. Maybe the emotional charge is just too high, or there's too much stress and they can no longer cope emotionally. And their attachment style kicks in like a reflex and shuts things down. So your avoidant partner might say or feel things like, I'm just not good at relationships, or I don't know what you want from me, or I don't do feelings, or just really simply, you're asking too much from me, because they don't know how to react emotionally. They often see themselves as the calm, emotionally self-contained one in the relationship. And they see you as intense and dramatic and unstable and even erratic. But underneath their cool and detached exterior, there's usually a lot of repressed fear, just as there is in the anxiously attached person. Because deep down, the avoidant also craves connection. Don't be fooled. They've just learned that it's not safe to show that. Because if you admit that you want closeness, if you show that you are vulnerable to the other person, then, well, you risk being shamed or rejected and potentially abandoned in the end anyway. You risk being rejected for needing something a little bit too much or for showing too many feelings. So instead, the avoidant partner hides it. They suppress that part of them that longs for connection, and they protect themselves by disconnecting first. And to make things worse, the more anxious someone gets with them, the more avoidant they become. Because the other person's neediness, it just goes to confirm their core belief. People will always want too much from me. And I'll never be enough to meet someone else's needs, not without being rejected. Because, well, I already know I'm not good enough. So what do? They pull away from you, or they shut down completely, or they simply make themselves unreachable. And that, of course, drives the anxious person absolutely bonkers. So who's really sabotaging the relationship here? Who's doing more damage to it? It's not just the anxious person, and it's definitely not just the avoidant either. It's the loop that these two attachment styles create together that ends up doing the real damage. Because the more anxious the anxious partner gets, the more avoidant the avoidant partner becomes, and the other way around. The more avoidant the avoidant partner becomes, the more anxious the anxious person gets. And in this back and forth dynamic between them, they polarize each other even more, because each person's behavior ends up reinforcing the other's attachment wounds, and in this way driving them further apart and further towards the extreme end of the anxious avoidance scale, right? I find that it's easiest, for me at least, to think of anxious and avoidant styles as being on a sliding scale, right? Secure attachment right here in the middle, anxiously attached on one side, avoidant on the other. And no one sits in exactly the same spot at all times. We move left and right on this scale depending on many things, like our own awareness, on self-reflection, on maturity. Have we tried a variety of relationships to really try our hand at trying to come closer to secure attachment? Depending on how secure our partner is, how secure is the relationship as a whole? Because we make different dynamics with different people. The more unaware and immature we are, the more we sit at the ends of this scale. But the more aware and self-reflective we become, the more we can slide towards the middle where secure attachment lies. But being together and being unaware and immature, it makes both of us, anxiously attached and avoidant, slide towards the end of this scale. Always. That's why this dynamic is so painful for both people and so hard to break out of, because it is magnetizing because of its polarity, right? Because it's an opposites attract kind of dynamic. It's basically the equivalent of the anxious partner saying, please come closer, and the avoidant moving away, you're smothering me. And the anxious person moves back, okay, I'll back off. And now the avoidant comes back, wait, are you really going? Why are you pulling away from me? Because both people want connection. And it keeps going back and forth like this, in a perpetual back and forth that nobody really wins. But doing this, back and forth, chasing and withdrawing from each other, eventually it tires both people out. And then they just begin to retreat to their separate corners, and they can't bounce back anymore because it's exhausting. This is why I say that they eventually polarize each other. The anxious person ends up feeling completely rejected or unseen and emotionally abandoned in this connection. And the avoidant person ends up feeling overwhelmed chronically and emotionally invaded by the other person. Like the other person is always encroaching on their mental space. So even if they do love each other, even if they're compatible in all kinds of other ways, it's the perpetual back and forth that wears down the relationship from the inside out. What these two are really doing is acting out their childhood survival patterns with each other. They're not even relating to each other so much as they're simply reacting to each other. And because of this, both people have to work to break this pattern by healing their core emotional wiring. If they don't, the relationship almost always collapses under the weight of this ongoing tension and pressure. So how do we actually break this cycle? Is it possible? How do you stop this loop from destroying relationships and making everyone miserable? Most advice says something like the anxious partner should give more space and the avoidant partner should lean into their partner more. And on a surface level, that's not wrong. But if you've ever tried to do this, and you are in this dynamic, you already know that it doesn't work for very long. And it actually serves in the end to polarize both people further, because this is not just a behavioral issue between the two people. This is about understanding what's happening beneath the surface, in your nervous system, in your beliefs, in the emotional programming that you picked up long before this particular relationship ever started. What's really driving the anxious avoidant dynamic is not a lack of communication. It's a lack of inner safety in both people. Each person is being pulled around by unconscious fears and old wounds and survival strategies, and each one of them is operating from that very unconscious level. The anxious partner is afraid of being abandoned, not just in theory, but in a visceral, deep physical way. And the avoidant partner is afraid of being consumed, of being emotionally smothered, and then ultimately thrown out and rejected. So when stress hits the relationship, which it always does, these automatic patterns just take over. That's when we get real problems. And they both feel like the other person is the problem, when in reality, both are being hijacked by unconscious patterns. So what actually heals this? How do we heal ourselves? Each person has to start noticing what gets activated inside themselves. Each have to stop acting out the same unconscious scripts and start creating new responses that are grounded in the present, not just rooted in past wounds and trauma. For the anxious partner, that means learning to self-regulate, to stop relying on the other person to fix every emotional spike that they're going through. It means learning to sit in discomfort, to trust that they can survive moments of space and of disconnection, and to reconnect to their own internal sense of safety. And for the avoidant partner, it means learning to soften, to stop hiding behind independence as a protective film, and to start taking small risks in vulnerability, in small and manageable ways in the beginning, but still to start. And learning to stay present when things feel emotionally charged, instead of disappearing altogether and shutting down. This kind of inner work is not about being perfect. It's about willing to look inward, to feel what you usually avoid feeling, and then to stop outsourcing your emotional safety to the other person. Because when both people start doing that for themselves, right, on their own, that's when this dynamic can work. Not when just one person is doing the work. That's when it stops being anxious versus avoidant, and it starts being a collaboration between the two people. And in an upcoming video, we're going to dive deeper into what this kind of inner work actually looks like. Because when we talk about inner work, we have to talk about unearthing our shadow selves into consciousness. And we have to see what's lurking down there. And that's what we'll talk about. So stay tuned for that, especially if you're anxious or avoidant and you're on a path to heal. So which of the attachment styles destroys the relationship faster? The real answer is that it's the one that doesn't take responsibility, Because at the end of the day, if you're an adult and you're engaging in adult relationships and you want these relationships to be healthy, it's not really about the attachment style you lean toward anymore. It's about whether you want to stay there, fixed in place wherever you are on this scale. Lock there. Anxious partners who stay stuck in panic and protest behavior, in overfunctioning emotionally without ever learning to self-soothe, they'll burn the relationship out. And avoidant partners who stay stuck in withdrawal and in emotional detachment and who defensively shut down, anytime there's conflict or discomfort in the relationship, they will starve the relationship until it has no choice but to burn out and die. So no, your attachment style is not what breaks the relationship. What breaks it is a lack of self-awareness that keeps you from growing out of your attachment patterns. And for the record, the people that do the most damage, whether they're anxious or avoidant, are the people who keep blaming the other person exclusively without doing any of the inner work themselves. Even if that's the avoidant silently blaming you. So if you're in this dynamic, the question is not which one of us is the problem. The real question is, are we both working at this? Are we both willing to look at ourselves and our unconscious patterns and our shadows and stop acting them out on each other? Because that's what it takes to heal this dynamic between people. It takes both people allowing themselves to be uncomfortable and inconvenienced temporarily so that they can get to the positive end result that they're both looking for in being able to connect in a healthy and more secure way, right? As secure as possible. And that is where real healing can begin. If you've lived out this dynamic, let me know in the comments. I want to hear your experience. What has helped you? And if you're on a healing path and you enjoy this type of content, please consider liking, subscribing so we can keep doing this together. Until next time.